People are coming in. Are you guys excited? I'm super excited to be here to talk about Atlassian's journey. My goal here for the next 25 minutes or so to talk about the huge transformation we have been through in the last 3 years. It's a massive transformation. Hopefully, I can give you a gist of what we did. And then we also learned a bunch of lessons in the process, so hopefully we can talk about that. But before I do that, I want to tell you about Atlassian, because that helps us set the context of all the things that we did. Just show of hands, how many of you have used Atlassian products or are using Atlassian products? Pretty much all of you. That's awesome. That's great to hear. Atlassian's mission is to unleash potential of every team. We focus on collaboration, human-to-human collaboration problems, and we build products that can solve and make it easy to work in a team. We've been on this journey for the last 16 years, and all the things that I tell you about Atlassian ties it back into the microservices land. So you'll see how it all plays out. The 16-year-old code base is not easy to deal with. We are also in a number of dev centers. As you can see, we have at least seven different dev centers, and the one to the right bottom, is remote. So we have an expanding number of people working from home. And this is an industry trend that's happening, right? So you'll see more people working from home in your companies and generally as a trend. And that's because we can leverage talent wherever they are, and the tools are becoming a lot more important. It's also easier to have a microservice rather than a monolith when you are in this setup. Atlassian is a multi-product company. We have JIRA, Confluence, Bitbucket, a number of homegrown products. And we also have products that we have acquired, like Trello, Statuspage, and OpsGenie. The life of engineering is more complicated when you have multiple products, because you have duplication. You need to worry about leverage, and we'll talk about some of those. Atlassian is both on-prem and cloud. So we give choice to our customers, and we ship our bits to on-prem. We also run it on cloud. And this makes it harder in terms of strategy on how you go to microservices. Culture is important. Culture and values play a big role in how you do these big projects. I'm actually proud to say Atlassian has an amazing culture, like open company, no bullshit, play as a team, there's no politics. Even so, doing big, massive projects like this is not a walk in the park. All right. Let me talk about the journey that we have been on for the last 3 years. I joined Atlassian about 3 years ago, and it's been a massive change. So I want to walk you through the big bits of what changed in the last 3 years in our journey, and hopefully you'll appreciate the magnitude of change that we have done. Let's rewind back to 2015. In 2015, we ran our own data centers. We stacked it, we racked it, we ran it in the US in one colo. And the teams, we had a single team for both server, which is our on-prem, and cloud. And we would build a feature, we would figure out what storage you need, what services you need, all bundle it as part of your bits, ship it to the on-prem customers, and then take those bits and run it single-tenanted, one per customer. Right? And we had 100,000 of those running in production. You can imagine how hard deploying and undeploying in that scenario would be. Right? We had done an amazing job to automate all those. So we were deploying once a week, but it was a pain to undeploy. It was extremely painful. And the other thing was, when you have these single-tenanted systems, we had a single VM, single machine for the smallest customers and for the largest customers. So the scaling was a big problem for large customers. And the caching was hard for smallest customers because you would be slower. So it's actually bad on both ends. So we knew we had to change. So the desired end state, so that was the state we were in 2015. This is for JIRA and Confluence, so both products independently done. There was no sharing of code between those two. They were shipping as independent bits. And the desired state that we wanted to get to was quite obvious for the team, even when I joined. We wanted to get out of the data center business. We wanted to add value to the cloud, value to our customers, so we wanted to move to cloud. We wanted to make it cloud native, which is making it multi-tenanted. To make it multi-tenanted, we also wanted the application layer to be stateless. And that's a massive change, right? If you think about 2015 to what we wanted to do, that's a huge change. But we took on that challenge. We kickstarted this project called Vertigo. That was the largest massive project we had done ever at Atlassian. It's funny, when we described the project, people would go dizzy. Right? They used to, whoa, this is so big. And that's how we got the name Vertigo. The first thing that we did was to unshackle ourselves. Right? We forked the org and the code base. And that in itself, I guess, let us make choices that we could not make before. So on the cloud org, we could start making choices that are independent of the on-prem organization. So on the cloud side, we created a platform org, which helped us to figure out what common elements between the products can we pull in. So creating a platform org was instrumental in figuring out creating these microservices. And we started building microservices in a couple of ways. One is we started peeling off code from the existing code base and creating services like commerce service, the billing service that we have was existing code base. We also started building new services from scratch. Services like data services, right, that currently has become like the backbone of all the real-time data stream for Atlassian. And then the next 12 months, this is all of 2016, was doing this massive surgery. And I can't do justice in the couple of minutes that I plan to spend on this slide. The kinds of things that we had to do was to build the infrastructure, making sure that we chose AWS. So we could deploy to AWS. We had the basics in place. We had security and all the things that we had to do. Then we had to make sure that we could do surgery on the existing code base in a couple of ways. One is we had these in-memory caches that every VM cached, and we had to peel out that cache and make sure that the services, that the main code base was stateless, and we had to create memcache on the side and make sure that they used in every place. And we also had to change our queries to make it multi-tenanted, right? So every week we would deploy this code. So we didn't want to be big bang. So what we decided to do was to keep the data center and also a public cloud instance, and we started deploying on both places. And we had the dogfooding instance on the cloud instance. So we could actually see every single day on the features that worked on our data center had to work exactly as is in our public cloud instance. So all through the year, we were going through the surgery, and you can imagine how painful it would be, I guess, when we falter. Like, we had to make sure that we didn't affect our customers, but internally, that was a massive change through the year as we went through. And there's a bunch of learnings which I'll get to. As we were making these changes, we were also deploying code into production. Some were enabled, some were not enabled. But we wanted to make sure that that was not something that we kept all the way to the end. And we also did a bunch of things to prep for migrations. The first 12 months was only doing the changes. And then we had 100,000 customers who we had to migrate. So by December of 2016, we assumed, yep, we are ready to make the migrations. And then it took us another 10 to 12 months to migrate all customers. Because each customer is different, and there was a whole bunch of other complications of our ecosystem and making sure we had all the right set of combinations in place. So we were very thoughtful in slowly migrating customer by customer. And we were very slow in the beginning, and we ramped up pretty quickly towards the end. Right? So that was 2 years. And by the end of 2 years, we declared Vertigo done when we shut down our data centers. Right? That was a big victory point for the team. And I should definitely give kudos to the team that executed this. You need tenacity for a 2-year project to get through such a massive change. And even in the last year after the Vertigo has been done, we have continued to invest in making sure our platform is more robust and more secure and more scalable, and we'll talk about a couple of those. So we started realizing the benefits of Vertigo during the migration itself for the customers, and also, I guess, we are realizing full benefits as soon as all the migrations were done. The first thing was a much faster dev loop cycle. We used to take a long time. We were deploying every week, but every feature used to take a long time to build. Because we had to figure out which database to use and how do you bundle it and ship it to our customers and then run it single tenanted. Now, in the cloud native scenario, we can figure out that, oh yeah, I can use DynamoDB and SQS, SNS, and building a service is actually much, much faster. And we deploy multiple times a day. In 2015, we had a plan to start a European data center. That was a timeline of about 18 months. So we took about 2 years to finish Vertigo. And as soon as Vertigo was done, we stood up a European data center in 1 month. Right? That was like a night and day shift in how fast we could move. And now we have more than 6 regions across the globe. Right? And that's been relatively easy, cookie cutter to build several more. The second one was hard because we had to figure out where we run and the region strategy. And then it's become a lot easier. It also reduced downtime because we were having issues with single tenants going down. And now, since it's a multi-tenanted system, it's actually a lot easier to get visibility. And we have tools to figure out the 90th percentile and 99th and the 99.9 on performance and reliability. So it's a lot easier for us to debug since it's all uniform across the board. And it's also faster given we have different regions and we have done pretty good caching strategy and fallback strategies. Vertigo let us get on the track of microservices. So I titled this slide as Journey Underway because it's never done. Like, there's lots of services that we are building. Vertigo itself got us several hundred services. Today, we have more than 600 services running in production. It gave us a common platform where we pulled in services, we built new services, and we have a platform org that's shared across multiple projects. So we are seeing leverage from different initiatives that we do. We have one authentication system, we have one billing system, we have one data service, and not like 6 of them that we had before. Microservices teams are actually happier. And we do this vital signs surveys in the company every year, every 6 months. And we can see the difference between microservices teams that own a service and have an identity and they can move on their own to be much happier than the teams that work in monolith. And we also had to invest in you build it, you run it culture, because that was not something we had before in the monolith. We had ops team dev team would throw it over the wall, and the ops team would handle everything in production. We had to shift completely towards a you build it, you run it model, where microservices teams could own the end-to-end quality of the service. This helped us to make sure that when there is an incident, they get a lot more customer visibility. It's actually helped us as an engineering organization to be a lot closer to customers. Because engineers actually see the issues, and when they see the pain of customers, they'll be a lot more careful. And we have moved from being more reactive, you build it, you run it in terms of incident management, to be more thoughtful as we build new services. All right. So we've been through the journey that I just described. So for the next few minutes, I want to describe the lessons learned. So I was thinking to a broad audience that has different, focus points, how do I explain all the things that we learned? So I bucketed them into 3 different areas. And the first one is about goals. Right? You need to have clear goals when you do a massive project, and when you're starting on a journey to build microservices. And the reason I say goals, it's you need to figure out what you're doing, how you're doing, and the strategy of how you're trying to achieve, and the clear boundaries of what you're trying to achieve. 'Cause you'll have to explain it to the product managers and designers and the rest of the company on saying, wait, I'm going to take the next 2 months and build this service. At the end of 2 months, I'm going to get exactly what I have today. That's not an easy sell. So making sure that you know what you're doing is extremely critical. And sometimes it may not be the right thing for you to do microservices. Because monolith works extremely well for a smaller setup. And you need to know when the cliff point is. At some point, it stops working and causes a lot of pain. But it's important for you to know how much runway you have on this. And maybe you're shipping a feature. You want to wait till the feature is shipped before you can start on this massive project. So the timing is also very important. It worked for Atlassian. And the reason it worked for Atlassian was all the reasons when I described Atlassian, right? I talked about suite of products. So it was quite obvious for us that we are duplicating effort across 7 different products. And we knew we would acquire companies and we would have more products in the future. So that was good. We also had distributed teams. So it's easier for microservices to be owned in any location. So what we did was, along with building out creating a new structure and figuring out what it is, we also figured out the principles on how do you allocate microservices to different locations. So we have this strategy of product is pinned to a location. Microservices can be anywhere, because the interface is documentations and API. So that helped us actually to help expand microservices in number of locations and to hire talent wherever they're available. And lastly, we had very specific goals. The goal of Vertigo was to shut down Atlassian's data center and to move up the stack to focus on customer value. Microservices was not a primary goal. It was a secondary goal. But it helped us, as we were doing the primary goal and had a pretty clear goal, we also accomplished what we wanted to and got to a much better shape. So know your goals and know the boundaries of what you want to achieve. Lesson 2 is invest in tooling. tools are extremely important. When I say tools, it's tools and programs that go along with it. Microservices brings chaos in the system. It's more chaos than monolith. It's easy to have one ways of doing things in a monolith. It's a lot harder in a microservice land. So make sure that you know how much chaos you need and build tools around it and automate things and make sure that you have programs to minimize that chaos. At Atlassian, we built several tools, and I want to list the 3 tools that were instrumental in how we thought about tools. First one is called Microscope. We built a system called Micros, which is a common way of deploying services into production. And we started getting lots and lots of services being built. And we built this tool that aggregates and visualizes, and you can search all the services that are available in our production and in our dev environment too. What it helped us is when an engineer wants to build a tool, they go in and figure out, oh, I need to build this service. Let me search if it already exists. And that helps avoiding duplication of microservices, which is extremely important. Second is tech stacks. We made it extremely easy for people to create services. We have this Micros instance where you can clone and create a separate microservice in minutes. Right? We have Ship It, which is our hackathon, where people churn out microservices. And lastly, it's important for us to figure out and have an operational rigor. Right? You want to make sure that every team that builds it, there may be junior people building it, there may be senior people. We had to create tiers of services, and we had to create the maturity model for those. Most companies do this in a top-down way. You have a design architecture review, design review, and then there is a check gate before it goes into production. Atlassian is very bottoms up. So we didn't want to create those checks. We made sure that there's self-disclosure from every team. So we created this framework which had several pillars, like security, privacy, compliance, reliability, architecture. And each had scores up to 20 points, and each team would disclose that. And we show that on a leaderboard in Atlassian. So teams, when they look at their rankings, like, wow, I'm in the bottom quartile. I don't want to be in the bottom quartile. So there's this gamification that happens where automatically over time the level increases in the company, which has been amazing. So invest in tools, it'll pay off. And the third thing is people. People is not the thing that people think about when you talk about microservices, right? That's the last thing it comes in, but it's the most important of all 3. It's all about people, teams, and culture, and I'll explain a little bit more. It's harder because we ignore it. First of all, the structure is different when you have microservices. You need to create teams that are autonomous. And you need to let them run on their own, which is not something people do because in monolith, it's one way of doing things. So there is an important aspect of creating a structure and changing it the way you have and breaking it down into smaller teams and letting them run. Second is managing expectations. You need to be able to explain it to the rest of the company. Right? And they need to be behind when you are doing these massive changes over time. And sometimes, even for us, we paused feature development for months when we had to do the surgery and get it into a better shape where we can add features. And you need the buy-in from the company. Otherwise, halfway through, people are like, you said 6 months, it's been 8 months, you haven't finished it. Because you know big projects take longer in whichever estimate that you use. What we did was that we added Vertigo as the #1 company OKR. So it became like the most important thing for the company to know, and we had these regular check-ins and presentations. So the whole company was along for the ride during those 2 years. And that was super powerful. And the hardest of these people topics is actually embracing the culture shift. You go from a culture that's not taking deviations from what you are, to a culture where you need to own it, you need to run it. You are going to fail sometimes. Some services are going to have incidents, and you need to be okay with that. Right? You need to figure out what's the right level and what's the right culture, and you need to start doing that shift. Doing a culture shift is the hardest of all the people things and hardest of everything else, because it's not like you tell the team and say, do this and walk away. You need to be on this every single week, and it's a muscle that needs to be built. And even as engineers, like, you need to start thinking about what things do we have to do regularly, and how do we build that muscle as yourself, as an organization, as a team, and as an organization. Right? The cultural shift things are extremely important. Let me wrap up the 3 things that I mentioned in lessons learned: goals, tools, and people. With this example, we had this service called the tenant context service, which is a service that's called in every single request coming in. And that was one of the services. We quickly figured out it's a tier 0 service, so if it goes down, everything goes down. And we built it. As you see, the first line there, 5 milliseconds, seemed pretty good. We started migrating customers, and boom, we ran into issues. Right? When it went down, it imploded the whole platform. So we had to make sure that we set up the team so that they could continually improve. Right? So it's important, when you talk about all the 3 things, the culture piece becomes important. How do you react when there is stress on the team? Right? And thankfully, we ended up in a much better shape than we were before. And this service was not easy. Right? There are a number of learnings in the process. Right? We had this service that had a wrong database in the backend, so we had to change the backend database. Then we quickly figured out that it was doing cross-region calls, which were a lot more expensive. So we had to localize and have it in every region. And then we also figured out that we could have a sidecar in every service. This is called from outside and also from internal services. And the cache in every machine prevented the inter-machine network hops. So once the team made all the changes, then we got to a happy place. But there is a time in between where it makes it extremely hard. So in summary, 3 things I talked about today. Goals. Know your goals, know your boundaries. Second, invest in tools and automation and the programs around it. And number 3, people. Like, don't forget about people. It's the most important of all those 3. So for this talk and for all of you, I wrote a haiku to summarize it. I'll leave it with the haiku. Thank you.
I made no promises.